here, the middleweight title main event. We got Alex Poitin Pereira versus Israel, the Stylebender Adesanya. They get their real nicknames this week. It's worth it, guys. This fight, every moment it's on the feet, it could end at any second. And hey, these guys even showed they're willing to get into some grappling, some wrestling if necessary. And oh man, I just can't wait for the rematch. So I mean, without further ado, man, I mean,
is it a rematch? Is it the fourth time they're fighting? Or is it a quadrilogy? What are we doing, right? How many times have they actually fought? Is he up 3-0? Is he up 1-0? Well, how do we want to talk about this?
What do you think, Luca?
Well, it's actually interesting. I mean, if we're going to talk about their entire 4 fights now that'll be going on, in my opinion, the fourth one. They had the kickboxing bouts, then of course the one fight now in the UFC. It's weird though. So obviously Israel is 0-3 against Alex, and normally when you see a guy being 0-3, it's hard to look at that and go, okay, there was some controversy there, or maybe some weird circumstances. Usually when you see a guy at 0-3, he deserves to be 0-3, or maybe if he doesn't deserve to be fully 0-3, he deserves to be have a losing record. He deserves to be the inferior fighter. But when you actually go back and watch their 3 previous fights, I just don't have that opinion about Israel here. His first fight was a controversial decision loss that a lot of people thought he won. The second fight, he almost knocks out Alex and then goes on to get knocked out himself in a fight that he was winning. And then in the last fight, we saw basically the exact same thing. He basically knocks Alex out at the end of the first round. Alex was absolutely saved by the bell. Israel goes on to be winning the rest of the fight and then gets finished himself in the fifth. It was very similar to the previous meeting. And so if you look at the totality of their 3 matchups so far, Israel has clearly been the better overall fighter for like 80% of the matchup. The problem is Alex is one of those guys, and we have this in kickboxing and MMA and boxing as well, where he just has that vicious power. And it doesn't matter if he's going out there and not throwing a lot of volume, maybe losing a round or two. At some point, he has that ability to clip you. And unlike, say, a Francis Ngannou, where it has to be in the first round or two, he's shown, obviously, in that last fight against Izzy, it can be late as well. And so the general dynamic of this matchup, in my opinion, is that Israel Adesanya is clearly the better fighter. He's also clearly the better kickboxer, going based on what happened in their previous meetings in kickboxing. However, despite that fact, he is basically in a matchup where, on a long enough timeline, eventually Alex is just going to knock him out. So the question is, can he get to Alex first and knock him out, or can he just survive over the course of 25 minutes and avoid that knockout from happening? But eventually, if they stand toe-to-toe, Alex can knock him out, whether it's in the first minute, whether it's in the last minute, it doesn't matter. And so this is a matchup where I feel like regardless of what fighter you think is the better one, who you actually favor in the matchup, you have to understand that dynamic. That is an extremely, extremely winnable fight for each.
I agree, man.
I love it. I really, really love the way that you teed all that up. I mentioned a bunch of things that we had mentioned the first time that we broke down the fight, including the wonderful breakdown of their kickboxing matchups. 100% agreed. Controversial decision. Could have went either way. The standing 8 count, right? If it's MMA, he wins the fight, but he gets to recover. Very similar in the way, eerily similar in the way that he got to recover after that knockdown in the first round in their fight at 281. You're 1,000% right. Izzy feels that he's the better fighter, right? When you say 3-0, you don't expect those kind of fluky circumstances to happen, right? When we line these fights, we line it over the course of 10 times happening, 100 times happening, but they really only get to happen once. Yet we get to watch this fight now for the second time, for the fourth time, whichever way you want to look at it. I have a half unit little flyer on Alex Pereira plus 130. Had a feeling the line was going to keep sliding. It has. I'm an Izzy boy. I probably end up. I may end up there. I want to see some face-offs. The problem with Izzy is I think he needs the perfect matchup, and I think you kind of saw that in their first MMA fight. He needed to be perfect with the grappling. He needed to be perfect with the clinch work. He needed to be perfect with protecting himself against the jab and landing his own jab first, which is not necessarily his style. He likes to be a counter striker. He doesn't want to be first, but he has to be versus Pereira. And now without the belt, nothing to lose. I mean, it's really tough. And one thing I feel like maybe I've learned, but I'm also maybe projecting. Time will only tell. It's the Kamaru Usman Leon Edwards thing. Does Potan just have his number? Is he his daddy? Does he got him figured out? Is that it? Like
And,
you,
and
you
one
just
thing on that one thing
please.
on that note as well is going into that fight with Leon Edwards and Usman the second time, or the third time I should say, the last one that they just had. I had tweeted a stat that champions in the immediate title fights rematches, they're 3-11 after Usman lost again. Now that stat goes to 3-12. So there's definitely something to these fighters in this situation, it being champions, losing, getting that immediate rematch, and just not performing well. Granted, that's a very small sample size, only 15 fights. But if you think about it logically,
Right.
there's actually, it makes sense. Like that's a
No,
fighter
to your
who.
point,
Oh, go
to
ahead.
your point. I'm sorry. No, sorry. To your point, it's exactly that. It's the sample size isn't even that small because how many title fights are there even? I think to your point, if you're getting an immediate rematch in 6 months, Usman 6 months, is it really enough time to fix what the problem was at a
Mhm.
championship level? Sorry,
And
Luca, please
not to
continue.
mention, oh no, it's a great point. And not to mention too, if you're coming off of say a knockout loss like Usman is, and you haven't had 2, 3 fights to go out there and get your confidence back, go out there and actually feel like your chin is a bit stable, feel like you actually, are the same fighter you once were. Fighters when they come off of a loss, that affects them mentally. When they come off of a knockout, it affects them mentally even more. Then you're talking about going against the same guy who just knocked you out. And we saw how Usman looked. He looked gun shy. He looked hesitant. He looked far worse than he did in the previous meeting, which he was actually winning until the knockout. It was like he basically got shot overnight. And so I think that there's something to that with these fighters where a guy like Izzy, he doesn't have, a crazy amount of fights in MMA, but he has around 30. And in kickboxing, he has around 100. It could be possible that it was just going to be his time no matter what. Just like maybe it was going to be Kamaru Usman's time no matter what. And he would have lost to maybe multiple fighters these last couple of times instead of Leon Edwards. Maybe he was just old. And maybe that's the case with Izzy. Maybe his time is just up because if you look at fighters who maybe did not get the immediate rematches, they still tend to do pretty poorly after they lose their title. Fighters tend to go on either losing streaks or maybe be kind of sub 500. There's not a long exactly history in the UFC or MMA period of a guy being a great champion or a dominant champion, losing his belt in devastating fashion, and then just going on to repeat as if nothing happened. There was George St. Pierre back in the day, but outside of him, there's almost no one. There's a reason why people still mention GSP versus Sarah because that is such an outlier to what we normally see from these champions who lose.
Unbelievable. Such a high level thought. And I think the most interesting part of that is that it means that we've taken guys, title runs like Usman's, title runs like Israel Adesanya's, title runs like Volkanovski's for granted as fans. They're so outside of the norm. And Luca Fury going metagame and bringing that here to life on the show. Basically, the whole reason why we started this podcast, it wasn't that we were the sharpest bettors like Luca Fury. That's why we bring him on. It's that we love talking about the fight, having a legitimate conversation about this whole sport that we love so much. And Luca, I mean, walking in like long lost family, brother. Like preaching knowledge, dude.
Love it. And listen,
I love the metagame. TB, what do you got?
Yeah. So I mean, listen, I'm coming in as probably the most biased guy in the room here. I mean, Israel Adesanya is the guy that really got me into, really breaking down these fights and watching the UFC the way I do. I mean, him stepping in for that, getting that short notice, 3-round main event against Anderson Silva, it felt like the torch was being passed. So take my analysis with a grain of salt, but I feel like either way, I think Izzy knows he has to be more aggressive in this matchup. And whether that's with the wrestling or being first in the striking more often, the leg kicks aren't working. Pereira checks them. And Jan Blachowicz also gave Izzy problem checking leg kicks. Also, he matches his size and reach. And Pereira is more massive, but, Izzy still has a slight reach advantage. And, the guy actually needs to go ahead and put his jab first and put something behind it. Use his feints, but actually put something behind it. Get out on the front foot. The more you back yourself up to the octagon, against the cage, the more you're going to give this guy a chance to land those left hooks. And he came closer and closer and closer as the fight went on. So ultimately, either way, fight doesn't go the distance at minus 135 is the way that I'm going to end up playing this because I think Izzy, the clinch wore him out. The offensive wrestling wore him out. He doesn't have that lifetime conditioning to do those things at a high volume, and he can't just use his leg kicks like he normally does. So if I was going to be Coach TB for a half a second, if I may, throw some body kicks, wear down Pereira's gas tank, not by wearing down your gas tank. You know, don't hurt your own legs trying to attack the legs of someone that can actually check your kicks and is an elite kickboxer. Go to the body. There isn't as great a defense for that, especially with the stance switching, but going to the body and you don't put anything before it, that's what opens you up to that left-handed counter. So fight doesn't go the distance. That's my pick will be Izzy, but man, I can't hate anyone playing either side. I can't.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I like the fight doesn't go the distance as well at minus 130. I'm not sure if I even want the under 4.5 at minus 125 if I can get the no distance at minus 130.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like solid enough, right?
Yeah, I'll take it. And like you said, Izzy, it's like when Izzy's against the cage, it's like watching a horror movie when you're like, don't open that door. Don't go in there. Watch out, he's in the shower. Like, just don't go down there. Why are we going down the creepy basement? Like, why are you putting your back against the cage against this guy where he's going to pin you down? You have
that's one of the things that blows my mind at MMA, where so many fighters will willingly back themselves into the cage. If you actually watch the second fight with Usman and Edwards, the reason that Edwards was losing that fight was because he was willingly putting himself into the cage. And in the third fight, he did not do that. And that's why he won it. It was a tactical adjustment. And you mentioned obviously, as he did that in their last meeting, I should say, the first MMA meeting. And ultimately, that's what him got knocked out. And so I'm very curious to see if he avoids that. But also, I think it would be smart for him to maybe take a page out of the John Jones playbook, which is basically just focus on long kicks for the first couple of rounds, try to get Alex tired out, and then start opening up with the hands a bit more in round 3, 4, 5 once Alex is tired more and his chances at the counter may be a little bit limited because obviously, again, we saw him get the knockout in the 5th round last time. It's not that he's going to gas and become, not a knockout threat anymore. But if Izzy, like you're saying, is, maybe goes to the body kicks, maybe he works the upper legs a little bit more, maybe less about the calf kicks that we're getting checked so easily. Maybe he does something like that, starts to slow down Alex a little bit. Maybe he gets to negate his pressure game, and then maybe Izzy can open up his hands later on in the fight. But early on, he has to absolutely avoid getting into wild pocket exchanges, and through all out the fight, including late, he cannot put his back against the cage. He just absolutely has to avoid that.
Totally agree. And, I think we broke this one down just about as good as you possibly can. What are you guys thinking here?
I mean, we nailed it. We had Luka come in, kill that shit, man. So we'll keep pushing along.
So hey, I just want to say thank you, everyone in the chat. Want to keep our flow going here, but you guys are very much appreciated. Once I